You're scrolling a thread at 2 a.m. Lines of plain text, no profile pictures, just strangers. Someone posts a question, another replies with a joke, and then there's that one message that leaves you disturbed to your core. Tonight, we're diving into 2chan, Japan's version of 4chan. Now, before you get cozy, be sure to subscribe to the channel since the goal is 20 million subscribers and we're almost there. So, be sure to subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's get into disturbing posts translated from 2chan. When I was a kid, my parents often told me, close the curtains when it gets dark. I think a lot of people heard the same thing growing up. Even without being told over and over, you probably developed the habit naturally. But I wanted to share this as a kind of warning from my own experience. Back when I was in high school, on a day off I holed up in my room alone, playing games the whole time. At some point I must have fallen asleep, and when I woke up it was already dark outside. Oh, I need to close the curtains, I thought, glancing towards the window. Then that's when it happened. Right outside the window, a person with long hair, a face pure white, wearing pure white clothes, was peering into my room. From their appearance I thought it was a woman, but thinking back I'm not sure if it was male or female. All I know is there was someone there. Frozen in terror, literally about to wet myself, the figure opened its mouth wide and began screaming. It was a huge, deafening shout. I bolted reflexively, tumbling out of my room and literally down the stairs, landing in the kitchen where my mom was. "What on earth are you doing? Are you okay?" she asked, coming towards me. Panicked, I stammered something like, "Someone's at the window, it's bad." I can't remember clearly what I said, but I was in such a panic. My mom was more worried about me falling down the stairs, but fortunately I only got some bruises. When I'd calmed down, we both went back to my room to check. Of course, there was no one outside the window. My mom also said she hadn't heard any huge scream at all. "Maybe you were asleep and had a dream," she suggested. I wanted to think so too, but I still remember that figure clearly. It's hard to believe that a living person would climb into someone's roof dressed like that, and do something dressed like that. So, I don't think it was human. Whenever I see actors on TV playing ghosts with white painted faces, the memory comes back and I start sweating and my heart races uncontrollably. Since then, I've always closed the curtains before it gets dark. I've also developed a strong fear of gaps, especially the gaps in curtains. Even in the morning, I never open the curtains standing directly in front of them. I open them from the side. Even if it's not a ghost, there's always the possibility of a real person peeking at night. That's scary too. It might seem like a small thing, but a frightening experience can stick with you for the rest of your life. What's strange is I actually have a story myself of something that happened when I was young. This is my own personal story from the UK, so I hope you don't mind. When I was young, maybe I was about 10 or 11, I basically had this giant window in my kitchen, and I was always terrified that someone would peek up and, in the dark. You literally couldn't see anything outside the window. It was pitch black at night, but my garden was really long, so really anyone could be out there. Anyway, I went down, and at the time we hung all our coats on the kitchen door. So when the door was closed, it was really hard to reach your hand in there and turn the knob to open it. And at the same time, my parents requested that we kept the dogs in the living room. So if you went to the kitchen, you had to close the door. Now, I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and my parents were in the living room, literally centimeters away from me, literally in the next room. And I closed the door, and I just get this feeling. Something just feels off, and I just stare at the window, and I just know something isn't right. And as I'm staring, totally frozen, a hand comes up and starts knocking on the window. And at the same time, I see a head start to come up. And when I see the head, I just totally flip out. I panic and I fall on the floor and basically go into the fetal position, and I scream for my dad. I scream like I've never screamed before, literally so loud. And after maybe 10 or 15 seconds like that, I realize, oh my god, no one's coming. I'm locked in here. And I pulled myself up and was like, It's up to me. I have to get out of here. So I stand up and I manage to reach my hand under all the coats after some struggle and open the door and get out of there. But what's creepy is when I went and asked my parents about it in total disarray, they said they heard nothing. Me, in the other room, screaming my goddamn lungs out, they didn't hear me. And that totally freaks me out. What the hell happened there? How could my parents and my sister hear nothing? The dogs didn't even bark. I don't know what that was. Could it have been a person? Yes. Could it have been in my head? Maybe. But what's weird is I definitely screamed. Maybe I slipped into another world or another plane of existence or something, but I don't know. It's really creepy. I really don't get how they didn't hear me. And whatever the hell that figure was that was knocking on my kitchen window in the middle of the night. Anyway, back to the Japan stories. In the latter half of my university years, I got bored and spent most of my time working part-time jobs and going out drinking. At my university, most of the necessary credits could be earned in the first and second year. I don't know if that system is good or bad, but with nothing left to do, I worked from morning to night. And on weekends, it was always drinking parties. One such night, I was at a party and suddenly I needed to use the bathroom. And it was urgent. The kind you know you won't be able to hold back. But the toilet was unisex, and there was only one stall, so a huge line is formed. I realized I couldn't wait, so I decided to go downstairs and use the restroom on another floor. Unlike the lively atmosphere upstairs, the lower floor was eerily quiet and completely dark, clearly unused. Normally I would have been too scared to go on, but I felt like if I didn't take care of this now, things would get disastrous. Relying on the light from my phone, I entered the restroom and turned on the light. Thankfully it worked and the room lit up. Once I was inside the stall and finally relieved, I noticed graffiti on the wall. It was strange, unfamiliar letters with rows of numbers written beneath. I wondered what it was, staring at it, and then it clicked. Oh, this is a phone number. From the number of digits and the style, it seemed to be a landline. Out of curiosity and thinking it might make for a funny story later, I decided to call it from my cell phone. After the ringtone, someone picked up and began speaking. It sounded like Japanese, or at least I thought it was meant to be, but it made absolutely no sense. It was like random hiragana syllables strung together, spilling out endlessly. Listening to it endlessly made my head ache, and I got scared, so I quickly hung up. Once I finished my business, I went back upstairs and rejoined the party like nothing happened. The next day, I suddenly remembered that phone call from the restroom, but when I checked my call history, there was no such number listed. I didn't remember deleting it myself, but since I'd been drinking, I brushed it off and didn't think much more of it. However, a few days later, something strange happened. While chatting during a break at my part-time job, all of a sudden I couldn't understand what anyone was saying. I could hear them talking, but their words had turned into the same nonsensical jumbled Japanese I'd heard from that phone call. I panicked, and then suddenly, everything went back to normal. I wondered what the hell was that, but convinced myself it was all in my head. Later, while I was quietly restocking shelves, a regular customer came up and stared right at me. I worked at the local supermarket known for having mostly regulars. Among them was one particularly troublesome woman named the Discount Granny. Her routine was always the same. She'd bring items close to their expiration date and try to negotiate discounts with the staff. This time she brought over a single manju bun, even at full price that cost less than 100 yen. Yet here she was bargaining as usual. I checked the expiration date and sure enough, it was that day. So I gave her a 10% discount. But unusually, she pushed it further. Can't you make it cheaper? I thought, what a pain, but then she suddenly said something I never expected. Boy, you're cursed. I froze. Then she went on. You can't understand what people are saying sometimes, right? That's the curse. It'll get worse and worse, until eventually, you won't be able to connect with anyone. And then, do you know what happens? What happens, I asked. You'll die. My mind went blank. The granny, on the other hand, gave a little laugh and grinned. I can lift the curse for you, but in exchange, give me a better discount. Really? I asked. She nodded, staring at me, and at that moment I noticed something about her eyes. They were incredibly clear, almost beautiful. She was someone most people avoided, but strangely I felt compelled to believe her. So I put a 5 yen tag on the manju, and it was such a huge discount that if my manager had seen it, I'd been in serious trouble. The granny looked genuinely surprised. Boy, I like you. Tomorrow I'll bring you something. And with that she left. The next day, the granny handed me a string of prayer beads, juzu. Wear this at all times. I thanked her and she continued with a grin. The curse on you hasn't gone away, but as long as you wear those, you'll be fine. That's because my curse is inside them. My curse is strong, stronger than any other curse. Then she left, in her unusually unsettling way. From then on, I stopped hearing people's voices turn into gibberish, but only as long as I wore the beads. After that, the granny started making me special offers. Anyone you want cursed, give me another discount. I'll curse them for you. But I always refused. Deep down, I believed her curses really would work. Eventually, I moved away from my hometown, but to this day, I still keep those beads on me at all times. Because without them, people's voices once again turn into incomprehensible nonsense. Later, while in school, I revisited that same restroom where I'd seen the graffiti, and the wall where it had been, completely wiped, as though someone had scrubbed it away. Maybe the writer erased it? I don't know. To those not involved, this might sound like nonsense, but for those living it, curses or a life or death matter. I work as a caregiver, mainly doing night shifts in hospitals. I've had many different experiences, but a few of them have been quite out of the ordinary. Among them, one event stands out in my memory the most. At the time, a nurse I worked night shifts with said to me, "When someone is about to die, don't you smell incense?" Apparently, veteran nurses often say that on the day a patient passes away. It isn't really about spiritual sensitivity, they said, but more like a kind of intuition that comes with long working experience. If you work long enough, you'll be able to sense it too. I could only laugh it off at the time. As I was still inexperienced, my head was filled with just getting through each day's duties. I couldn't imagine what I'd do if someone passed away during my shift, and I didn't feel confident that I'd be useful. Even though I was just a caregiver, when a patient died, I'd have to assist with post-mortem care. The thought of facing someone's death made me uneasy and heavy-hearted. Time passed, and luckily I didn't have to experience saying goodbye to a patient for quite a while. But eventually the day came. That day, I was on a semi-night shift that ended at 1 a.m. Just after midnight I thought, today's almost over and nothing went wrong. I was relieved, but then I heard a monitor alarm in the distance. I went to check with a nurse and was told that the patient had just stopped breathing. My blood ran cold, but the nurses immediately began giving out instructions, not giving me time to freeze. When a patient dies or suddenly deteriorates at night, we not only handle that, but we must also care for the rest of the ward's patients, so things become really busy. Somehow, I managed to carry out my instructions, and after that, all that was left was to hand over to the undertaker. I was so close to going home. What bad luck. And just as I thought this, something so unexpected happened. 3 nurse call buttons went off at the exact same time. In this ward, most patients were bedridden or had dementia, so it was impossible for them to all press the call buttons themselves. They almost never even rang. But in that moment, the calls blared non-stop. When we rushed to each room, we saw that the elderly patients who had been quietly sleeping were now sitting up. They pressed their hands together, chanting sutras, and told us, "We must go and send them off. Please let us out." A chill ran down my spine. If it had just been one person, maybe I could have brushed it off, but 3 different patients in 3 different rooms with no connection to the deceased all said the same thing. Normally, even answering questions was difficult for them, but now look at them. Later, I was told that this sort of thing happens sometimes. The explanation from veteran nurses was that perhaps the elderly intuit something, and even with dementia, this kind of sense remains. At the time, I was only terrified. But looking back, the desire to press one's hands together and send someone off feels profoundly human. Now I try to keep that same mindset, to properly see the patients off to the very end. I've continued in this line of work, and I'm now considered a veteran myself, yet I've still never smelled the incense scent before a death. I've never heard that anywhere else either. Maybe some special power was at work. Places where death is close at hand often have such mysteries. When I was a university student, I worked part-time as a cleaner in a certain hotel. This is a story from that time. Nowadays, maybe people don't care as much, but older buildings often avoided using the numbers 4 or 9. For example, the rooms would go to 401, 402, 403, then skip directly to 405. No 404. The reason was that 4, or she, sounded like death, and 9, ku, sounds like suffering. It might sound like a joke, but it was taken very seriously, and the hotel where I worked was no exception. At first, I worked alongside a senior staff while learning the ropes. The ones who trained me were A-san, the longest serving friendly talkative veteran, and B-san, the second longest serving, who was efficient but a bit cool. The work itself wasn't too complicated, but there were many details to check, so you couldn't let your guard down. Depending on the shift and room availability, cleaning was usually done alone, so once you'd learned the tasks, you were expected to manage on your own. Around the time I began solo cleaning, the three of us were on break when B-san said, "By the way, be careful when you go into room 405. I asked what she meant. "It comes out. That thing." She dangled her wrist limply in front of her, making a ghostly gesture. "Huh? You mean a ghost?" I blurted out. Immediately, A-san cut in. "It's just people's imagination. Don't worry about it." B-san added, "Yeah, we've never seen anything ourselves, but some staff who quit and even some guests said they experienced things, so just in case." Even so, I felt uneasy. Time passed, I cleaned room 405 many times alone and nothing happened. I thought, see, nothing to worry about. But then it happened. One day I went to clean room 405. It was an auto-lock door, so I opened it with the spare key and looked around the room. It wasn't very dirty, so I headed towards the bathroom to start cleaning. Clack! I heard the door open. When I turned around, I saw a person's hand leaving the room. Someone was still inside. I rushed to the door and checked the hallway, but no one was there. The hallway was a long, straight corridor with all the other rooms locked tight. There was nowhere to hide. My whole body shook, and I called the front desk on the house phone. B-san came to help. "What happened?" she asked. I explained, though there wasn't much she could do. We quickly cleaned the room together and went back to the break room. Checked the records. The guest in 405 definitely checked out half an hour before you went in. With staff present, we checked the security camera footage. The guest had indeed left. When we reviewed the moment I experienced the strange event, we saw it on the camera. The door to 405 opened by itself, though no one touched it. And then I stepped out afterwards. "What the hell was that? Nobody's died in there or anything," once said one of the staff. Apparently, 405 had originally been numbered 404, but because guests reported scary experiences, they changed it to 405, thinking the number was bad luck, but it didn't help. Even after performing purification rituals, strange occurrences continued. As a countermeasure from then on, 2 or more staff were always sent to clean room 405. For a while, nothing happened, but one day when I and A-san went to clean 405 together, we saw it again. As soon as we stepped into the 4th floor, we saw a hand of someone entering 405. Even A-san saw it this time, blurting, I think I just saw it too," in total shock. We worked up the courage to go in, but of course, no one was inside. And the door had been locked. It should not have been open at all. Though creeped out, I continued working there for about 2 years before quitting. I decided to forget all about the hotel, but a few months later, B-san contacted me. I just wanted you to know Asan passed away. She was in an accident on her way home from work. The date was April 4th. It's probably just a coincidence, but I think we should all be careful. Anyway, take care. Since then, I've avoided the number 4 as much as possible. Even though I try not to think about it, the fact that Asan died on a date filled with 4 still lingers in my mind. The hotel has since closed and no longer exists, but this remains the one truly unsettling experience I've ever had. This is a story I heard from my late grandmother. I don't know if it's true, but it was her wish that the story be passed on, so I will share it here. When she was young, my grandmother married into the household of a wealthy local family. She thought, now I'll be able to live without worries, but just then, the World War broke out. Life during wartime was harsh, but she survived, and my grandfather, who had been conscripted, amazingly returned home alive. Grandfather was a quiet but kind man. However, after coming back from the front, while still gentle, his eyes had a strange, frightening intensity, my grandmother said. Grandfather had brought back with him a filthy, tattered doll. When asked about it, he would say, "I picked it up at the front. It's important. I can't let it go." If anyone tried to throw it out, he would become furious. Normally, he kept it in a box out of sight, but whenever grandmother caught a glimpse of it, she felt chills all over her body. Anyone would sense it was not a good thing. After the war, Japan was in chaos, but thanks to the family's wealth, they did not suffer immediately. However, misfortunes began to pile up. Grandfather's parents died from illness and accident. Relatives and business associates also began passing away one after another. Around this time, grandmother miscarried her child. The family business faltered and the situation became dire. At that point, a fortune teller who had long served the family offered advice. I hesitate to say this, but I believe the cause of the family's decline lies in the doll your husband treasures, the one that he brought back from the war. I sense a very strong curse in it. You should have it properly consecrated and let go. Grandmother agreed, but grandfather flew into a rage and drove the fortune teller away. Eventually, bankruptcy was declared. That night, grandfather told grandmother, "From now on, I'll have nothing. We'll be starting from zero. I'm truly sorry. I don't want you to follow me. If you stay with me, you'll only suffer. Please leave and live a happy life." Shocked, grandmother protested. "Why would you say that? If times are hard, that's all the more reason to face them together. Do you hate me?" After a long silence, grandfather said, "I know that doll is evil. Perhaps it's wrong to blame it for our misfortunes, but after so much I can't dismiss it, and yet I still cannot part with it." He confessed the truth. During the war, his unit had been stationed in occupied territory. At first, relations with the locals were friendly, but as the war worsened, everything changed. They even had to fight those who once welcomed them. I had no choice. There was no other way. Forgive me. He killed many people. It felt surreal, like watching a movie. But the scene after was hell on earth. While inspecting the battlefield, he noticed movement. A doll by the side of a small child was moving. Dolls don't move on their own, but he swore it did. Driven by the thought of, "I must save it," he hid the doll in his uniform and brought it back to Japan. I believe that doll carries the resentment of those I killed, but it was my own hands that did it. No matter the reason, I must bear the burden of what I've done. To forget would betray them. At this, grandfather wept. It was the only time grandmother ever saw him cry. She thought, what an honest, serious man. And more strongly, she realized, I love him. So she told him, "Curse or not, I will bear it with you. Let me stay by your side." And together, they began a new difficult life. Grandmother later laughed about how hard things were, but said the greatest support was the child they adopted, my mother. All our relatives were gone. Your mother was truly like an angel to us. Because of her, we could endure anything. She would repeat this often, to the point my mother would laugh and say, "How many times are you going to tell me that?" Grandfather passed away before I was old enough to remember him. As per his wishes, the cursed doll was cremated with him. Perhaps it stole much from them, but since we, his descendants, live happily now, maybe the curse finally ended there. A few months after telling me this, grandmother also passed away. At the end of her story, she told me with a serious expression, "War must never happen again. No one can be happy from something like that and live sincerely, like your grandfather." Hearing this, I too wanted to live earnestly, in a way that could bring some good to those around me. I've always loved dolls, but there was one time I had a terrifying experience with one. This is that story. Since childhood, I spent most of my time alone. My mother was already a single mom by the time I could remember. She worked irregular hours as a nurse, so our lives rarely overlapped. Sometimes my grandmother came from the next town, but since her legs were bad, I only saw her once a month or so. On top of that, I was shy and introverted, so I had no friends. My only playmates were my dolls. Even so, I didn't feel very lonely. I think I was simply so absorbed in playing with dolls that I didn't notice the solitude. I usually played house with them. Each doll had its own role. I set up little homes in schools, and even though I moved all the dolls myself, the world I created felt alive, endlessly entertaining. I was completely drunk on my own little world. One morning, after eating the meal my mother had left for me, I headed to school. On the way, I noticed the garbage collection area piling up high with trash. It must have been a bulk pickup day. And then I saw it. A doll's head lying there. The body must have been destroyed, just the head remained, about 3 centimeters across. Our eyes met, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, but I couldn't take it to school. On the way home, the trash was still there. The doll's head remained. Without hesitation, I picked it up. I brought it home and added it to my family. Its forehead had a small scar, but to me, that was its unique feature. Though it was only a head, I welcomed it with excitement, as though a transfer student had arrived, and my doll games became even more passionate. At one point, I left for the bathroom, and when I returned, there was an unfamiliar girl in my room. "Can I play with you too?" She looked my age, with long hair. I'd never seen her before. Back then in our area, it wasn't unusual for people to walk in and out of each other's houses, so I didn't think much of it. Unable to refuse, I played dolls with her. It turned out to be so much fun that before I knew it, night had fallen. "I'm hungry. Want something to eat?" I asked. She nodded. I grabbed some food from the fridge, but when I came back, she was gone. I figured she left as suddenly as she came. I was more thrilled that I'd had so much fun, I could hardly sleep that night. After that, she started showing up often. She said her name was A pseudonym. She never said where she lived, but she appeared and disappeared suddenly. Still, we had so much fun playing that I didn't care. My mother and grandmother even remarked, "You've become much more cheerful lately." With A around, I had started gaining more confidence and even made other friends. Then one day as we were playing, "I'm hungry," I said. "Then eat this," A replied, pulling out 2 daifuku rice cakes. "2 of them, so we can share." "Thanks," I said, happily devouring mine. Smiling, A didn't eat hers. "You can have mine too." "Really? Are you sure?" "Sure, I'm not hungry." Feeling guilty but grateful, I took a bite. Immediately something was wrong. It was bitter, not sweet. I tried to spit it out, but A lunged forward and clamped her hand over my mouth. Friends eat what their friends give them, right? Her strength was terrifying. I couldn't break free. Choking and gagging, I couldn't breathe. A just grinned as my vision darkened. When I awoke, I was in a hospital bed. "What on earth were you doing?" my mother cried, hugging me. Apparently, when she came home, she found me collapsed in my room. Judging from my lips and skin, she realized I was suffocating and immediately performed first aid, clearing my throat and restoring my breathing before calling an ambulance. The doctor said a few minutes more and I wouldn't have survived. "You were choking on that doll's head you picked up," my mother said. But I remembered eating the daifuku A gave me. Back home, we searched everywhere for the doll's head, but it was gone. Then my mother said, "You know, I've seen that doll's head before. That scar on the forehead. I used to play with a doll just like that when I was a kid." "What? And what's the name of that friend you've been playing with? A?" That's strange. I gave that same doll to the name A when I was little. So what exactly had gotten stuck in my throat? To this day, I don't think I'll ever know. It happened one evening on an ordinary weekday. I had just finished work and the sun was dipping low, painting a sky a deep orange as I pulled into the driveway. The air was warm for the day, with a faint smell of dust rising from the road. I parked the car in my usual spot, stretched, and got out. That's when I noticed a child. I don't know where they came from. One moment the yard was empty, the next there was this small child, about the age of a first or second grader. They weren't familiar to me, and I know the faces of most kids in the neighborhood. Without hesitation, they walked right onto my property, as it was the most natural thing in the world. I froze for a moment, surprised at how casually they moved. They passed along the side of my house, heading towards the back, skipping a little like a child in a good mood, but their face was turned slightly upwards, with a wide smile that made them look like they were enjoying a secret. Of course, my first thought was to stop them. Even if it's a child, stepping into someone else's yard without permission isn't good. I quickened my pace, rounded the corner, and had expected to see them still walking there, but there was no one. It didn't make sense. My house was surrounded by a fence on all sides. It isn't particularly high, but it's sturdy, and climbing it is a noisy task, especially for a child. There are no gaps to squeeze through, no open gates, and it would take time and effort to climb over that. It had only been a few seconds where I didn't see them. I searched carefully. I looked behind the storage shed, peered into the narrow space where air conditioning unit sits, checked the garden, nothing. The yard was completely still, not even a stray cat or a bird fluttering about. The silence made the whole thing feel heavier than it should have. That night when my husband came home, I told him what happened. I was unsettled, and I think he saw that from the way I kept glancing towards the window. Let's check the security camera, he suggested. We had installed cameras some time ago because of a minor incident in the neighborhood. They covered the front yard, the driveway, and one side of the house, the same path the child had taken. We rewound to the time I got home, and there I was, pulling in, getting out of the car. The footage was clear. Then, on screen, I turned my head towards the side of the house, as if noticing something. And then, just as I remembered, I walked over there in that direction, my expression focused. But on the entire footage, there was no child. Not a shadow, not even the faintest outline of movement, just me hurrying off camera. My husband frowned, then gave a little laugh. There's nothing there. You must have imagined it. His words didn't comfort me. I know what I saw. That child's face was so clear. They were smiling so brightly, like they were about to play a trick or share a secret. It wasn't sort of a fleeting image you catch out of the corner of your eye. I looked directly at him. I can still picture it. Since that day, I've chosen to believe it was a Zashiki-Warashi, a household spirit, said to appear as a child. I tell myself it wasn't anything malicious. The child I saw looked too happy, too full of life to mean harm. Still, when I pull up to the driveway in that fading light, I sometimes catch myself glancing at the same spot by the side of the house. I half expect to see that small figure again, smiling up at me. And when I don't, the memory of that brief encounter lingers, leaving me with a strange mixture of unease and warmth.